Welcome back to the Stances Everything channel. My name is Dave, and today we are back in the garage. It is super hot in the garage today, so I don't know how long I'm going to last in this part of the episode, but I am going to clip this all together so that you can see me finally add some filler to this fender. Now, like I said, it is very, very hot in the garage today. It's been about 30 to 35 degrees all week. I don't know what that is in Fahrenheit right now off the top of my head, but I'll put it somewhere, maybe right there. It is so hot that you are probably wondering why I'm wearing this toque. This is a functional toque. It keeps the hair out of my face. Anyway, I am going to be adding some filler today to cover up the areas that are in bare metal from the patches that I've put in. Now, I know some of you are probably thinking, Dave, you should do primer before you do fiberglass filler. I have had that question on my mind for a very long time. I've asked probably about 12 body guys which way I should go. 6 of them have said primer first. Half a dozen have said filler first. I've had some pretty good luck doing both ways, but this way I'm going to do fiberglass first. Fiberglass is waterproof, and it's going to go really well with the seam sealer that I put on the other side of this fender. So that is what I'm going to do for this process and for this video. Products I'm going to use for this job are going to be Napa Body Pro Mini Fiber Filler. This is a short strand fiberglass filler, and then I'm going to use a lightweight filler over top of it. I'm going to try not to go too hard on making this perfect because the rest of the fender is going to be patina, but my goal is to obviously seal the work that I did up on the outside and make it look like I actually didn't patch any of it and that the fender is just beat up from use rather than rust. That is my goal. And then once I have this all filled up and sanded and looking okay, then we are going to get to the exciting part, which is going to be another video where I try and match the patina of this fender to the patina of my truck overall. What I'm going to do first though is a couple of the spots have started to rust over again. Just, you know, some light surface rust from sitting around. So I'm going to use my cookie wheel and I'm going to knock some of that down in preparation to add some fiberglass filler. So I will put the camera on the tripod and get to work with that, and then I'll come back in a little bit. I've gone ahead and I've knocked down the rust that was on some of the bare metal areas that I had worked before and done some filler work on. And I have wiped it down with grease and wax remover. So the next thing that I'm going to do is I am going to add some filler, particularly from, I would say about here to through to here. You can see I've got a couple of weld marks you can see in there, one more there and one more there. So I'm probably going to do a skim coat of filler down through here. Now you can see that I've bare metaled a lot of it. That's just if I get a little bit sloppy and some filler gets over there, I can knock it down no problem. And then I am actually going to go over that once I'm done doing the body work with some red oxide primer to get this kind of back to a browny rustish state before I start building up my layers of paint after that. I have also gone ahead and I have added some masking tape along here just so that I do not get filler wrapping around the bottom of the fender. Again, this fender is going to be on the ground most of the time that this truck is parked, but I absolutely hate seeing chips of Bondo and little bits of Bondo and specks of Bondo wrapping around panels when really it could have been addressed with some masking tape and sort of feathered out versus just ignoring it and pretending it's not there. So I'm going to mix up some filler. I am going to apply it to this area. I am definitely going to put the camera on the tripod while I do that. And then we're actually going to add filler to all of the other areas as well. I'm not sure if I'm going to tripod all of that, but we will definitely come back and I will show you how I knock this down and get it to a point where we can start building it back up to match this to the rest of my truck. Okay, so I've got my mixing board, which is an old metal panel. I've got my filler. This one's almost empty, but it has a little bit for this spot here. And I've got my hardener. I'm going to mix this all together, and then we are going to start applying it to this fender. All right, to get the filler out of the can, I am going to be using some of my finest silverware from inside the house. So I always like to start with a little bit of filler first, just so I'm not wasting a lot of material. This stuff isn't super expensive, but it's also not that cheap. everything's getting a little bit more expensive now, so I just want to make sure that I'm conserving as much as I can. And if I go too much excessive on this, it's just more that I got to sand off. Okay, so the filler's starting to kick a little bit now, so I'm going to wait for this to sort of dry, and then I'm going to mix up a little bit more and go back over it. I like to build up in layers versus doing a big honking one first time out. Helps make it a little bit smoother and easier to sand. So while this dries, I'm going to shut off the camera for a little bit. I'm going to go over all the other spots, and then I'll come back when it's dry, and then we'll hit it down with my DA sander, and hopefully we'll be in a bit better of a spot. Everything's kind of kicked off now, and I am able to go through and sand it. And how I'm going to be sanding it is I'm actually just going to hand bomb this down now because it hasn't kicked to the point where it's super hard to get through, and I should be able to chew through it pretty well with some 150 grit sandpaper just on a standard little sanding block here. I'm going to start this spot here first because it is quite flat and easy to work with, and it'll be a great example to show you how far I sand things down before I then go over with the lightweight filler after that. So I mean, there's nothing really glamorous or exciting about sanding, but it is definitely a necessary step in this process. So I'm going to jam the camera on the tripod once again, and I'm going to get to work doing this. Now it's time to take a look at what I did and where I'm going to go next. So as a sort of horror show as this does look, this is exactly where you want to be when you're doing this work. So you want to have nice feathered edges around sort of all the low spots. There's some pretty deep low spots in a couple of places. You can see down in there. And so what I'm going to do next is I am going to add a little bit more fiberglass filler here because you can kind of see where I do have a weld that's exposed here, and I want to cover all of these. Right here, there was a weld, and there was welds all across the top there. Those have all been filled in. So other than this area where I am going to add some more fiberglass filler, the rest of this is ready for lightweight filler, which is going to fill in a lot of these deep gouges here, this low spot here, and just kind of get everything nice and prepared. So that's kind of where this is at. The next step for me is going to be to continue to sand everything else and then get it ready for the next level of filler. So a lot of that sanding work, like I said, it's boring and it's just not very great to watch. So I'm going to do a lot of that off camera, but I will come back before I do sort of the next level of filler work and show you how I apply that and what I'm aiming to do with that second set of filler. And then obviously with this being a patina fender, I don't think I'm going to have to go too much harder after that. I don't think I'm going to have to go to like a glazing putty or an icing filler level or anything like that. I think I'm going to be able to sort of use fiberglass and lightweight filler and then knock the entire fender down a little bit and then start building up my patina. And I think it's going to give it a sort of natural look that isn't too pristine, but is going to match sort of everything else. Okay, so it's another day and I'm back out in the garage working on this fender. And I've actually moved from working on it on the bench where there wasn't a lot of space. I moved from the bench to the sawhorses so that I had a little bit more space to move around. There isn't a ton of space over there, but if I put the piece on here and have where I'm standing kind of in this area, then I have a lot more space to work and I don't have to worry about the backside of the fender knocking everything off my bench. Just one of the things you got to work around when you don't have the biggest work area. I am going to sand this, and I'm actually going to cheat and use my random orbital sander to knock some of this down. I also remembered that I have a ton of Evercoat Rage Gold that I can use instead of some of this other Color Flow and Napa lightweight filler. So once I am done with the fiberglass, knocking it down and happy with how that's looking, I'm going to hit it with the Rage Gold. For those of you wondering about Evercoat Rage Gold, you've probably heard about it before. You've probably seen it used on 1,000 other channels and TV shows. It is very much worth the money. I actually bought that on sale and I bought a lot of it. I bought it during COVID actually when I was doing my cab corners and all that stuff. It's really, really good. So if you can splurge for it, definitely get it. It knocks down way better. Comparing it to standard Bondo brand stuff, like, you know, the pink stuff, just so much better. I can't even describe it. Just the way that it sands and it spreads. Really, Evercoat doesn't give me any money to say that. I'm just being 100% honest here. It is definitely worth the money. I am going to load up my sander and we are going to get to work sanding some of this and then come back and see what it looks like. Okay, so I got my sander out, as you can probably tell from the dust all about my person in the garage. And we have been able to sort of feather out this area where I added a lot of filler. So you can see, if I recall, there was a hole sort of in here that I've patched. So that is filled in now with some filler. This is a first coat. I'm going to talk about that in a second. And then down here where I did a lot of patchwork, you can see that all of the welds are covered in here and it kind of goes around. But you can see in here, we've got a lot of low spots. That is okay because this fiberglass filler was just mainly to cover over the welds. So I'm going to go over this with the Rage Gold to just fill this in because it's a lot easier to stand. And all of the structural sort of waterproofing that I wanted the fiberglass filler to do is done. Same thing with this area. And then we've got this area here that is actually probably one of the better spots. But if I move this around, you can see in this area here, that there is a little bit of weld that I did not cover. So before I get this area in the Rage Gold lighter weight filler, I am going to add a little bit more fiberglass filler right here because I just want this to be nice and touched up. And then, you know, those were the main spots that I did. So it's just a matter of going around, making sure I touched everything up, and then putting some more of the lightweight filler on and the fiberglass filler in that spot. Once again, I am going to pop you guys back on the tripod, and then I'm going to put a little bit more filler in these spots, and then sand it all back down again, and then hopefully it looks okay, and then I can start putting some of the red oxide primer, which is going to be my base primer, and see if I have any pinholes or anything like that that I need to cover up. Put down some of the Rage Gold filler on a few of the areas. You can see that this does spread really nicely, and it's going to sand down super easily. So I'm just going to do a little bit of sanding work here. I'm going to hop to probably about 220 grit to do this sanding because I don't want a lot of sanding scratches left. So I'm going to use the sander quick. I'm going to go through it, and then I'm actually going to get my sanding block out, and I'll show you the technique that I use for sanding this down with the sanding block. I mean, if you watched any sort of bodywork videos, there's a bunch of different ways to do this. And I'll show you what works for me. And then the idea or the goal today is to kind of get this to a point where I can use some red oxide primer on it. And then I can, from there, blend in some of this patina and make it all blue and make it match the rest of my truck. So I'm going to knock this down and then we'll come back with the sanding block. Okay, so I'm ready to kind of show you what I would do in this situation. So I've sanded down the latest bit of Rage Gold filler that I added to this particular area that had a bunch of hard grooves in here. So you can see a lot of those are filled in, but I do still have some here. So what I do when I'm sanding something like this is I'll do one pass with the sandpaper kind of like this, and then the other one will go across this way. And what I'll do is first time I'll come kind of down, and then next time I'll go up, and I'll just keep that pattern going back and forth, give it like a nice crosshatch. And I find that that really helps make the sanding work look consistent. And when I put the primer on, I don't see too many gouges in just one direction, because going back and forth over all of it kind of gets it nice and gets it smooth and prevents me from wasting a lot more material when I'm sanding it and priming it. Because I do most of my work with rattle cans, high build rattle can primer does not build nearly the same way as primer would from out of a gun, and the cans aren't that cheap, so I don't really want to go through too much of it. So I'm going to do some of this work now on this spot here. Hold on a sec. Okay, good to go. So I have gone through and I've done my crosshatch method in this area here, and you can see a lot of the gouges that did exist were gone, and primer should fill this in pretty well, or at the very least let me know where I need to sand more after I've done it. But it all feels pretty nice, pretty consistent, and obviously it is probably way overkill for a patina fender, but that's the way I like to roll. So I have this all left to do, and then some more work in here, and then we should be good enough to put some primer on. So I'm going to get back to it, and then next time I'm on camera, you should see me shaking up a rattle can to put down some primer and see where we're at. I have no idea what happened, but this can, there is no nozzle on this. This is pretty much a full can and there's no nozzle. I have no idea what happened, when it happened. So luckily I keep a little bit of black on hand at all times, so I'm gonna mist it with that and then we'll see. Okay, so it's been a couple days since I sprayed that primer on there. As you can see, I wasn't stoked with a couple of areas, so I did knock them down a little bit just to even some spots out. I'm going to continue doing that today. I'm actually going to go back up to, or back down to 180 grit, then build it back up with the 220, get this all smoothed out. And then while I have the sandpaper out, I am going to go over these areas again, this one and this one, just to make sure that I feel extra good. I mean, with bodywork, the more sanding you do, the better the job is going to be, provided you do the correct grits before you add some paint. So that's what I'm going to do. And then hopefully by the end of tonight, I will be able to put this back in primer. I actually ended up being out here giving her for about an hour, just blocking all these areas down to get it to a point where I think it's going to look pretty good. So you can see that I've blocked down here, and some of the primer remained. I went down to the filler in some areas and the bare metal in other areas. One thing that I need to remember, mainly for myself, is that this fender was not straight to begin with, and I'm not making it straight. I just don't want anyone to be able to see where I put the patches in. So it's kind of a bit of a balance figuring out how far I should stand versus what I should leave. At the end of the day, it's going to be a little bit different than, you know, a razor straight body job, and I just kind of have to get used to that. So this area though is nice. There wasn't too many dents in here, so this is actually pretty solid. It's all leveled out and it's going to prime out pretty nice. Whereas this one being the bottom of the fender, there's a bunch of dents in there, and I kind of want those to remain so that it looks like this truck was used and abused, but it did not rust out. Up here, again, you can see that this turned out pretty well here. This area is where I put the patch in, and it has sanded out quite nicely. And then where those two rivets are, that sanded out quite nicely as well. So I have actually, I've run some wax and grease remover over it already. I'm going to blow it down with the air gun and then probably wipe it down one more time, probably actually get a tack cloth out. And then we are going to start spraying and see how it ends up. It's another day, and I have come back out to see what the black primer looks like after I sprayed it last night. So it's pretty solid. So you can see a little bit of dents and stuff here. That was pre-existing, but everywhere in here where I patched looks quite nice. All in here where I patched, you can't really tell I did anything, and that sort of continues all through here. So for the work that I'm doing for Patina Fender, that is absolutely fantastic. But what I need to do next is, because of the way I'm going to be patinaing this, I actually need all of this to be kind of similar to this red. So I'm going to use some of my red oxide primer. I've actually never used this brand before. It's the Value brand, but I figure since I'm going to be sanding this down so much that I shouldn't spend too much money. So I'm going to see how this goes. I read some reviews. Some people said it's great. Some people said it sprays pretty thin. So I guess we'll find out. I also took some time yesterday and cleaned up my bench a little bit. I put a lot of the sandpaper back in the box, just because once I do get this red oxide primer, I'm going to pause on patinaing this for a bit to finish that bedside out to get it to the same level as this one, so that just things are kind of moving together in pace. So I will make another video on finishing up that bedside, but today we are going to put some more primer on this. So the first step is going to be wiping it all down once again with some wax and grease remover on the areas where I haven't sprayed any red oxide yet. I'm not going to do it on the primary areas because sometimes the rear wax and grease remover will actually pull up fresh spray paint. So I'm just going to clean this up a little bit, blow it down, and then we're going to go over it with red oxide. Okay, so it's later that same day. I've done a little bit of cleanup in the garage. As you can see, I've put away my sawhorses, moved my tripod, moved my welder back, because the fender is now dry and we're ready to take a look at what it looks like after all of the work we've done. So if we move over here, kind of shimmy through my very busy garage, you can see the fender out here in the sun. Now, this spot does look a lot better than it did. If you remember, there was a rust hole that came sort of up into there. It's all fixed now. This is actually a dent that was already in the metal. So like, as far as matching sort of the damage of the overall fender, we're doing pretty good, because you can see that there's like dents and sort of paint overspray and scratches. So we didn't want to go too good with the repair so that it looked odd, and you could definitely see where I patched it. But everything does look like I haven't gone in there with a Bondo trowel and a bunch of welds and grinds and stuff. So this turned out really quite nice. This was a dent that I had fixed and knocked down, so that's a little bit better there. Where I'd filled these rivets looks really good, quite good actually. You can't even really tell where they were. I think they were in this area here, but that turned out quite nicely. Here where let me get out of the light. Here where I had a patch from it being rotten down here, again, worked out quite nice, especially when you consider that there's a lot of patina and wear over here. This isn't going to look too out of place. It's nice and smooth. Here where I did a big patch at the bottom is all looking quite nicely and in keeping with sort of the rest of the fender. So I'm pretty stoked on how this all turned out, all said and done. So the next step is for me to start putting some various colors of blue on it. So I have a few colors that I know for sure do not match from when I was trying to patina the cab. So what I'm going to actually do is I'm going to bury those blues in that fender, and then I'm going to go on top of it with the blues that I know match. The reason I'm going to use those other blues is because I paid for them. They're custom match. I can't do anything else with them, so I might as well throw them on that fender for a little bit extra patina work. And layer on the blue, sand it down, put a little bit of extra magic in there just to get the patina looking how we like it to, and then it is going to match the rest of the truck. And then I'm going to have to do that fender and then the entire bed. The bed is a lot, so I don't know if I'm going to do that with rattle can, so I really do need to figure out what I'm going to do there, but we'll get to that in a later video. Speaking of later videos, there's a lot of cool stuff to be coming later this summer for this truck. Most importantly, it is going to come back running, so we're going to be able to do a running video, which is going to be pretty awesome, and that shouldn't be too long from now. So once again, thanks for watching all of the videos. Give me a like, a comment, to share. Let me know how I'm doing, what you want to see, what more you would like to see me do on this truck in video format. And I'm really happy to sort of show you how I'm making on, and I'm really pushing to get this thing fully on the road next year, but definitely running and driving this year. So once again, thanks again, and we'll see you in the next video.